After 6 months of living in Vietnam on $1,400 a month from Social Security, I finally decided it was time to show you my real numbers. Not the numbers you see from people living in luxury apartments. Not the people eating at expensive Western restaurants every night. And not the people traveling around Southeast Asia every few weeks. I'm talking about a regular retired American living on Social Security, trying to make a limited monthly income work. Before I moved to Vietnam, I spent months searching for videos from people in a situation similar to mine. I wanted to know something very simple. Could a person with about $1,400 a month actually live comfortably in Vietnam? I wasn't looking for a luxury retirement. I didn't need a penthouse overlooking the ocean. I didn't need a new car. I didn't need to eat steak every night. Honestly, I wanted something much simpler. A small apartment. A comfortable bed. Internet. Some decent food. A television. A place where I could walk around, sit outside, maybe go to the beach, and occasionally eat at a restaurant without worrying that I'd spent too much money. I wanted to retire. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life worrying about money. So after 6 months here, I decided to sit down and look at what I've actually been spending. And today, I'm going to show you where that $1,400 goes. I'll tell you what surprised me. I'll tell you what turned out to be more expensive than I expected. And I'll also tell you about an unexpected expense that reminded me why moving to another country doesn't mean you can forget about emergencies. But before we get into the numbers, let me explain how I ended up here. I retired at 67 years old. And I didn't retire rich. I don't have a big pension waiting for me every month. I don't have $1 million sitting in an investment account. My Social Security is about $1,400 a month. That's what I have to work with for my regular income. For most of my working life, I bounced around from one job to another. I worked warehouse jobs. I drove delivery trucks. I spent time doing construction. I worked in maintenance. I did factory work. Basically, I did whatever work I could find that paid the bills. And at the time, I wasn't thinking very much about retirement. I was thinking about the next paycheck. Then one day you wake up and you're 60-something years old, and you start looking at the numbers. That's what happened to me. I checked my Social Security estimate and realized that I was looking at roughly $1,400 a month. And that's when retirement started looking very different. I realized that I wasn't going to have the kind of retirement I'd imagined when I was younger. I wasn't going to spend my days traveling around the world. I wasn't going to live in some beautiful retirement community. And I definitely wasn't going to be living a luxury lifestyle. The question became much simpler. Where could I live where my money would actually give me a decent life? I started looking at different countries. Thailand, the Philippines, Mexico, Vietnam. And Vietnam kept getting my attention. There was something about Da Nang that especially caught my interest. You've got the beach. You've got mountains. You've got restaurants everywhere. You've got markets and coffee shops. And compared with many American cities, everyday expenses can be much lower. But what really interested me wasn't the idea of living cheaply. It was the possibility of living simply. There's a difference. I didn't want to move somewhere just because a bowl of noodles was cheap. I wanted to wake up every morning and feel like I could afford my life. That was the goal. I also wasn't planning to spend every dollar of my Social Security. Over the years, I'd managed to put together a small retirement cushion. About $50,000. It wasn't enough to make me wealthy, but it was enough to make me feel a little safer. I also sold my car and most of the things I owned before moving. And I decided that my savings would be my emergency fund. I wasn't going to use that money to upgrade my lifestyle. I wasn't going to use it to travel constantly. I wanted it sitting there in case something went wrong. Because one thing I've learned about getting older is that you can plan everything perfectly and life can still surprise you. So I packed my things, bought a ticket, and came to Vietnam. I ended up choosing Da Nang. And I'll be honest with you. The first few weeks were strange. Everything felt different. The language was different. The traffic was different. The food was different. Even crossing the street felt like something I had to learn. But after a while, I started settling into a routine. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't spending as much money as I thought I would. My life had become very simple. I'd wake up, make coffee, go for a walk, maybe grab breakfast somewhere nearby, come back to the apartment, watch television, read, talk to people. Sometimes I'd go to the beach. Sometimes I'd go out for dinner. And some days I wouldn't spend much money at all. That lifestyle started feeling normal. And after 6 months, I finally sat down and added everything up. Here's what my average month looks like. My biggest expense is rent. I pay about $350 a month for a simple furnished apartment. It's not luxury. It isn't one of those giant apartments you see in some expat videos. But it's clean. It's comfortable. I've got a kitchen. I've got air conditioning. I've got internet. I've got everything I actually need. And that's really the point. I don't need a $1,000 apartment to be happy. I need a place where I can sleep comfortably and feel safe. So let's call rent $350 a month. Next is food. I spend around $320 a month on food. That includes groceries, local restaurants, coffee, and the occasional meal that costs a little more. And this is one of the things I really enjoy about Vietnam. I don't have to cook every meal just to save money. There are plenty of inexpensive local options. I can go out and have a simple meal without feeling like I've destroyed my budget. But I also don't eat out constantly. That's the key. If you're eating imported food every day and going to Western restaurants all the time, your budget is going to look very different. I mostly eat local food. Rice, noodles, chicken, fish, vegetables, fruit, and whatever else looks good that day. So food comes in around $320. Utilities are next. Electricity and water average around $80 a month for me. And electricity is one thing I pay attention to. Vietnam is hot. And air conditioning can make a noticeable difference in the electric bill. So I don't leave the air conditioner running all day just because I can. I use it when I need it. That brings utilities to approximately $80 a month. Phone and internet together are another relatively small expense. I spend around $35 a month. Transportation is next. I don't own a car. That's one expense I don't miss. For short trips, I can use local transportation or ride-hailing services. Sometimes I walk. Sometimes I take a taxi. And because I live in an area where many things are fairly close, I don't have to spend a fortune getting around. My average transportation cost is about $80 a month. Then I set aside around $100 for healthcare and medical-related expenses. Some months I don't spend all of it. Some months I spend more. But as I get older, I don't want healthcare to be an afterthought. That's one area where I would rather budget too much than too little. Then there are the little things. Toiletries. Household items. A haircut. A coffee here. A replacement charger there. Something I forgot to buy at the grocery store. A small purchase that wasn't planned. All those little expenses add up. So I give myself around $130 a month for miscellaneous expenses. And finally, I put aside about $50 a month for immigration-related and travel costs. Because living overseas isn't completely free of paperwork and travel expenses. Vietnam isn't a country where I can simply assume that I have permanent retirement status because I decided to move here. My immigration situation has to be planned properly, and I make sure I stay within the rules that apply to me. That's something I would tell anybody considering this kind of move. Don't build your retirement plan around rumors you heard from somebody in a Facebook group. Know what visa or immigration status you're actually eligible for. Know how long you can stay. And know what you'll need to do when that period ends. So when I add everything together, my average monthly budget looks roughly like this. Rent, $350. Food, $320. Utilities, $80. Phone and internet, $35. Transportation, $80. Healthcare, $100. Miscellaneous, $130. Immigration and travel allowance, $50. That gives me a total of approximately $1,145 a month. My Social Security is about $1,400. So on an average month, that leaves me with around $255. Now, you might be thinking, that's not a huge amount of money. And you're right. It's not. But here's the difference. When I was living in America, having only a few $100s left over after paying the bills would have made me nervous. Here, because my basic expenses are lower, that leftover money gives me breathing room. I'm not getting rich. I'm not building some massive investment portfolio from my Social Security. But I'm also not constantly wondering whether I'm going to make it to the end of the month. And that feeling is worth a lot to me. But there is something else I need to tell you. Because if I made this video sound like everything is cheap and perfect, I'd be doing you a disservice. Around my 5th month here, I had an unexpected health expense. I started having a problem with one of my teeth. At first, I thought it would go away. It didn't. The pain got worse, and eventually I had to see a dentist. I ended up needing an examination, imaging, medication, and treatment. By the time everything was finished, I had spent roughly $450. And that was a reminder. Living in Vietnam can reduce your everyday expenses. But it doesn't eliminate unexpected expenses. You're still going to get sick. Your teeth are still going to hurt. Your phone is still going to break. Your apartment is still going to need something repaired. You may need to travel unexpectedly. You may have immigration expenses you didn't anticipate. And as you get older, healthcare becomes even more important. That's why I don't recommend anybody move overseas with exactly $1,400 in their bank account and no backup plan. The monthly income might work, but you still need an emergency fund. For me, having that $50,000 cushion changed the way I experienced that dental problem. I didn't have to panic. I didn't have to put it on a credit card and worry about how I'd pay it back. I just paid the bill. And then I moved on. That, to me, is what financial security really means at this stage of life. It's not necessarily having a huge amount of money. Sometimes it's simply knowing that one bad month isn't going to destroy you. After 6 months in Vietnam, I'm also learning something else. You don't need as much entertainment when your daily life is enjoyable. Back home, I used to spend money because I was bored. I'd drive somewhere. I'd go shopping. I'd eat out because I didn't feel like cooking. I'd find some reason to leave the house. Here, some days I can walk outside, get a coffee, sit somewhere, watch people go by, and that's enough. And then there's the beach. I can go down to the beach without paying an entrance fee. I can walk along the water. I can sit there. I can watch the sunset. And I don't have to spend $100 to have a good afternoon. That has changed the way I think about money. I'm not trying to buy experiences anymore. I'm just trying to enjoy the ones that are already around me. And that's probably the biggest difference between my old life and my life here. My retirement isn't glamorous. I don't travel every month. I don't live in a luxury high-rise. I don't have a personal driver. I don't eat at expensive restaurants every night. Most of my days are actually pretty boring. And I'm perfectly okay with that. I watch television. I read. I go for walks. I talk to people. I get coffee. I eat. I sleep. I go to the beach sometimes. And that's my retirement. And honestly, after spending most of my working life worrying about the next paycheck, boring sounds pretty good. Now, would I recommend that everybody receiving $1,400 a month move to Vietnam? Absolutely not. Your situation could be completely different from mine. Maybe you need expensive medical care. Maybe you need a car. Maybe you want to travel frequently. Maybe you want Western food every day. Maybe you don't like hot weather. Maybe you need to be close to family. Maybe living in another country simply isn't for you. And that's okay. This isn't a video telling you that Vietnam is some magical solution to retirement. It isn't. It's just showing you what can happen when you take a limited income and put it in a place where that income can stretch further. For me, the biggest surprise wasn't actually the food. It wasn't the rent. It wasn't even the beach. It was the feeling of not constantly checking my bank account. That's what I was looking for. Back home, I had started thinking about retirement as something I had to survive. Here, I'm starting to think about it as something I can actually enjoy. I still have to watch my spending. I still have to plan. I still have to keep money aside for emergencies. And I still have days when I miss things about America. But I don't feel like I'm racing against my own finances anymore. I have about $1,400 coming in every month. I spend roughly $1,145 on my normal lifestyle. And on a typical month, I have around $255 left over. It's not a fortune. It's not luxury. It's not the retirement you see in glossy advertisements. But for me, it's enough. Enough to have a roof over my head. Enough to eat well. Enough to go out occasionally. Enough to enjoy the beach. Enough to pay my bills. And, most importantly, enough to breathe. I didn't move to Vietnam because I wanted to become rich. I moved because I was afraid that my social security wouldn't be enough to give me a peaceful retirement. 6 months later, I'm starting to believe that maybe I didn't need more money after all. Maybe I needed a place where the money I already had could go a little further. And if you're sitting at home right now looking at your social security statement wondering how you're ever going to retire, I understand that feeling. I'm not going to tell you to sell everything tomorrow and buy a one-way ticket. Do your research. Visit first. Understand the visa situation. Look into healthcare. Have emergency savings. And most importantly, make sure you're moving toward a lifestyle you actually want, not simply running away from one you don't. Because Vietnam isn't perfect. No country is. But 6 months in, living a simple life on $1,400 a month, I can tell you this. I'm not living the retirement I dreamed about when I was young. I'm living something different. Something quieter. Something simpler. And maybe, at this point in my life, that's actually better. I don't need luxury. I don't need to impress anybody. I just want to wake up, drink my coffee, watch the world go by, and know that I can afford the life I'm living. For me, that's what retirement was supposed to be all along. Not having everything. Just having enough.